Good morning. It's Pop, Dennis Murray. Today is Popcast 55, and it's called Nature's Wisdom, Part 5. And I'm going to start with something fun. This is my mouse pad, and this is my great granddaughter Beverly when she was a little tyke. As you can see, she was a happy one. And I just happened to think of it because I have to move it to bring this mic where I want it to be. And it's kind of fun. Going to be an interesting day today for me. I have somebody coming to help me clean my house. She hasn't been coming for almost 3 months now because the kids are trying to protect me and her. She's older than I am from the coronavirus. But I'm going to, stay away from her while she does her work. And I'm hosting a socially distant bachelorette party for my granddaughter Maggie tonight. She's having a sort of a pub crawl, but it's a house crawl in our community in Crofton. And I live just down the street from where she does. So they're going to have two or three of her close friends and family are hosting, brief gatherings for drinks, and they're having dinner back at her mom and dad's house, which happily for me was the house that I used to own when my kids were little. After I moved from Bowie to Crofton, and so one of my sons asked to buy it from me when Gail and I were thinking about buying a bigger house to make room for all the grandkids that were coming in droves. And so it's kind of fun going back to a house that has been in the family since 1973. And it's beautifully maintained. My son and daughter-in-law have just done a fabulous job. And so, a lot of fun personal stuff. It's just part of my mood for the day. I'm going to see. I wrote down the names so I wouldn't leave anybody out, but there's so many names. I won't take your time with it. I'm going to see a lot of my grandchildren and some of their spouses and an in-law. And I'm really looking forward to it. I have to sit on the front porch bench and maintain a social distance for my own safety, and my grands will gather in the driveway, and there aren't so many of them that there'll be a number, but not a huge number, so they can maintain adequate space. How much the young people are actually doing that these days is an issue. So I want to go back to add more to what I talked about yesterday and the day before. Yesterday, I talked about the difference between a psychological universal and an external objective universal, of which I said there don't seem to be any. That as much as we used to think there were some, and we hoped there were some. I think we're left with the substitute that's perfectly adequate for our human life. I keep forgetting to look at the camera instead of at the picture on the screen. The psychological universals turned out to be more than adequate for our psychological needs, and that's what counts. Basically, your psychological gratitude for the just when you get old enough to realize, gee, I'm born, I'm alive, isn't this fabulous? Um, is a psychological event, and your decisions about how you'll behave in public and private matters is a psychological event. Um, your decisions about things like marriage and gender issues and racial issues, we always have to think of those. Um, and I'm going to tell you a story about Juneteenth in a few minutes. A really wonderful story that I was involved in a long time ago. Um, and so the important things in life basically involve you're making decisions about your personal behavior, and particularly your behavior in relation to other people. So it's all psychological. Um, and therefore, the fact that there are psychological universals is really fabulous. It's more than adequate to meet our needs. How you feel about your own life as you get older, your judgment of yourself, and believe me, you're going to make one. Um, Even if you're just 12, like my oldest great granddaughter is going to be in August, um, you're already making judgments about yourself, how you think you're living, and compared to some other psychological standard of how you think you should be living. So again, it's all psychology. So, and as you get older in particular and you reflect on your life, what you're going to ask yourself, in terms of, is my life well lived, is nothing other than, a psychological question. How have I behaved towards other people? How have I behaved towards the sense of awe that I feel within me? Have I turned my gratitude for being alive into a lived thanks by using my gifts as best I'm able? Have I heeded the call to others by living as in fruitful relation to lots of other people? If those are entirely psychological questions and they're entirely personal, only you can answer them. And if you find that you give yourself a passing grade on those things, an enormous psychological event is occurring in your life. And it's a kind of quiet satisfaction. And of course, it's not like you don't realize all those things that you screwed up, all those times when you said things you wish you hadn't said and did things you wish you hadn't done. You have done things you're ashamed of. Almost everybody in the world has. And some will deny it, but they mean it even to themselves if they're really in trouble internally. Um, so there's also forgiveness for yourself, another psychological event. So it turns out that psychological universals are the important universals, because almost all the stuff of our lives involves psychological reality, psychological events. And so viewed that way, the slow, reluctant dawning that there weren't any external universals turned out to make us go looking harder elsewhere in the cupboard. And we found some fabulous, fabulous foods for the soul there in the psychological cupboard. Um, so that was yesterday. I wanted to repeat that again. Usually I try to find better words, and so I often use different words for the same thing. Hopefully, one set of the words is a little more appealing to you. It reaches your heart, your soul, your understanding better than the other set. So I kind of do it on purpose, and it's kind of because it's hard for me to make my lips stop moving. Forgive me. Okay, so today I wanted to take the same material and look at it from another point of view, relating backwards to a couple of days ago about universals again, proof versus trust. So if we were trying to, have external universals, um, then those were things we could prove. And so it turns out, that's not what you look for a psychological universal. You want to see, can I trust it? You already know you can't prove it. It's an intuition. It's something from deep inside your psyche. Can you prove that you're experiencing an overwhelming sense of fear and wonder we call awe? Does that? Of course not. You can you prove that the sense of awe you feel seems to connect you to the yourself, your own inner self, to the universe beyond, and to others? No, you can't. It seems it's not something that screams, I can prove it, I can prove it. Um, and for you, the choice is not, can I prove it, but should I trust it? Can I trust it? And the answer seems to be both yes, you can, and yes, you should. Um, in part because it's plain from the failure of external universals that what else you got? You this is the best available choice for you to make sense of the world, to trust these, psychological universals. And they do seem to be calling you, and there is some, other source of information that makes your trust seem um, wise. Um, so trust is a matter of wisdom. Proof is a matter of that applies to things outside of the psyche and outside of our psychology. And this is important to keep in mind because a lot of people are going to make statements, and you need to put them in a context. This guy is going to say things like there aren't any universals. Nothing is real. And so long as you understand, whether he does or not, that he's talking about the kinds of external universals, objective universals that could be proven or disproven, yes, he's right. And you understand that the kind of universals that are actually important in your life are the psychological universals, and no, they can't be proven. They can only be trusted. So you need context. People are going to make a lot of statements. You'll make a lot of statements. You have made statements in your life, and as you reflect on them, you're going to figure out, oh yeah, well, that actually was only true if I was speaking psychologically. Jesus is Lord. This is part of what the personification of the sense of awe and wonder. So first question is, well, can we trust the intuition? Can we trust this awe? The second question, yeah, and the answer is yes, we can. There's plenty of answer. I mean, it's my wisdom that I'm offering to you. Other people will offer contrary wisdom. It's my wisdom that yes, there's adequate reasonableness for trusting that intuition, that the awe we experience is real inside us as a psychological experience. And it may be a real external experience, maybe, can't prove it. Uh, and most of us who think it's an external reality personify it and give it one of the names of God. So you say Jesus is Lord. Put it in context. So the context is this is a subjective statement. You're not saying I can prove that by external realities. You're saying it's true in my heart. I live by it. It matters to me. It seems to be a true external reality, but I recognize that I can't prove it. And but that doesn't mean it's any less valid and real, and that it is most assuredly in the the kind of thing that can be trusted, that's wise to trust and live by. So context is very important, and all of my work essentially is related to what we've been talking about for today, yesterday, and the day before. It's all about the difference between psychological things that can be trusted, um, the, and external claims that have to be proven, of which there's very few aside from, things relatively unimportant in living your life, like how far is the moon away and how do you design a rocket to get there. Happily for most of us, we don't have to know that much math. So there are definitely external realities, but not universals. Um, and the real universals are inside us, but we need to keep in context that that means we can trust them, we can't prove them, but trusting is adequate. We don't need to prove them to live by them in confidence and with a feeling of wisdom, and with the support and comfort we get from each other. Um, they're more than adequate to face our lives together. So, okay, so now last item, Juneteenth. Um, I've had a fairly wonderful life, in all honesty. I've been blessed so many times in so many ways. And one of the ways I've been blessed is I've met so many really interesting people and gotten to know them, a little bit over the decades. And one of the interesting souls was a judge named Spotswood W. Robinson. Now, when I went to uh, law school, I worked in the courthouse in D.C. In the daytime, and I went to law school at night. Um, I already had, a family, and I'd had family help to finish college in a hurry after I got married after freshman year. Finished college in 2 more years, but I was quite anxious to be on my own, so I got a full-time job in the courthouse in the federal court in Washington, and I walked down the street to Georgetown Law at night. Um, so uh, stayed there took 4 years to go to law school at night, and then I wanted to have a job in the general field of being a do-gooder. I didn't really want to practice law. I felt it was too much about making money. And I got no objection to making money. I just wanted to be, a large part of my life. I wanted it to be, sort of a side effect of whatever it was I was doing. So I spent 2 more years after I finished law school working in the courthouse. I became a fairly experienced courtroom clerk. So I was the guy that kept the evidence. I sit in a little small bench in front of and below the judge's bench. And a federal court in D.C. is a pretty important court. And the building is fabulous looking. The courtrooms, it looks like, some really good stuff out of a movie, but it was real. And because I was relatively experienced and had a certain way about me, uh, when new judges came along, I was often assigned to be their courtroom clerk. So they have law clerks. That's different. They're older and wiser than I was. Um, but the courtroom clerk, like I said, keeps the evidence and swears the witnesses. Do you solemnly swear, etc. I was pretty good at that. I got some compliments because I apparently got into it pretty good. So they assigned me to Judge Spotswood W. Robinson, and I got to tell you, this is a man whose memory is very strong. All these years later, that was way back in the 60s. And, I was just a real young guy. Judge Robinson was a tall, slender, um, black man who was born and raised in Richmond from a family that had already been established as uh, achievers. Um, he was able to go to law school with the support of his family, and he was able to practice law with Thurgood Marshall. And he was essentially the kind of brain trust. He did the research, he backed up, uh, he created the factual bases uh, for Thurgood Marshall to be able to stand up and use his great gifts of oratory plus organization of materials in such a way as to have the best chance to appeal to his side to be given fair consideration. And so that Judge Robinson was a very special person who had really been there, done that, and I was honored, frankly, to meet him, and we became, friendly acquaintances. And I enjoyed working with him. They usually assigned us for 3 months at a time, so I had him a couple of times, and we would chat some back in his chambers, and by happy chance, he got appointed to the appeals court in Washington, which is like one step below the Supreme Court. It's a really serious, important part of our judicial system, and to be on it is a high honor. But his statesmanship, his legal research, his capacities for really digging into a case and bringing it, a pretty good mind, deeply applied, made him ideal for the appeals court. So at his swearing in, I was invited, and I got to tell you, it's kind of a special moment to be included in a small group who are in the chambers after the swearing in, standing around with drinks and canapes. Present in the room was Roy Wilkins and two or three other luminaries of the civil rights movement, which I had given my own heart to. It's part of why I didn't want to practice law. I wanted to do something, in the general category of a do-good thing. I wanted a job that really seemed to matter. And my wife and I had both been pretty actively involved in civil rights. And to be there with these people who had done it, it was special. So I told you this was about Juneteenth. So early in the time I knew him, Judge Robinson and I were working on some paperwork, and the date was June the 19th. And he told me the whole story of Juneteenth and how much it meant. And it's funny because I've asked an awful lot of people, and most people had not heard of it until recent years. And it's just nice that it's part of a whole host of memories and experiences that have enriched my life. Okay, so once again, Rome, Rome might need to be left alone for the rest of today. See you tomorrow. Take care. Bye bye.